Load, take aim, fire all rounds. 6 HIMARS rockets pierced the sky and obliterated the Russian headquarters in a single strike. The Kursk mobile headquarters is turning to ash, along with the Russian admiral and 20 of his senior officers. The sound of the explosion echoes in the silence. A massive pressure wave, a black mushroom cloud, the untouchable myth of Kursk, was shattered in an instant.
In this video, you will see how a single HIMARS salvo turned the Russian Navy Deputy Commander-in-Chief and his entire staff into powder in a matter of seconds.
You won't want to miss this fireball. To support our channel and us, don't forget to turn on notifications, subscribe, leave a comment, and like the video. Don't miss a single moment of every new shot as it hits your screen.
Don't miss our expert commentary.
One click takes you to the heart of the battle. We're continuing now. July 2nd, 2025. Morning.
At 7:14 a.m.
Location: Kursk Oblast, Koronevo village.
The Russians have set up a temporary headquarters.
The command tent was in the shade of the pine trees. Rear Admiral Gudkov was preparing for the briefing. His assistant, Shihaliev, was by his side. Over 20 officers lined up. The northern brain of the Black Sea Fleet was here, but their position was leaked to radio waves. The Ukrainian listening team solved the coordinates. The target list was updated. The Russian Army's forward command post was marked. The HIMARS battery was waiting. Nearly 90-kilometer distance was child's play. 7:25 a.m. The order to fire was given immediately.
The ramps rose from the camouflaged tents.
6 rockets took off at 1.7-second intervals. A green trail of fire appeared in the sky. Russian radars were focused on the dummy ramps. The real ramps remained invisible. The rockets reached supersonic speed. A laser beam hit the tent roof. The chain of explosions was about to begin. The smoke from Kursk had not yet risen. Eyes were locked on the coordinate screen. Fingers counting, the minutes were sweating.
This was just a preview.
Now we are diving minute by minute into HIMARS' most valuable target. The listening team had been scanning the radio for 3 weeks. Shortwave cycles were recorded. AI software extracted voice signatures. Gudkov's frequency was tagged. A coordinate prediction model was established. The HIMARS battery was moved to a mobile base. The fire team used 2 of the 4 vehicles as live carriers and 2 as dummies, creating shadows with RF deception balloons. Russian Orlan 10 reconnaissance drones mistook the decoys for the real thing. The thermal signatures of the real ramps were covered with heat-reflective patches attached to tractor engine covers. When selecting GMLRS munitions, the M31A1 variant was chosen.
The approximately 90-kilogram monolithic warhead had enough power to peel off the steel concrete composite front protection layers like a bandage.
Additionally, Koronevo's temporary headquarters was housed in tents made from factory sheets, making it possible for a single rocket to penetrate 2 sections at once.
However, the Ukrainian artillery officer explained the plan as follows.
3 rockets targeting the northern entrance, 3 rockets targeting the southern blind spot. Rockets 2 to 5 with a 1.8 millisecond phase difference, rockets 1 to 6 symmetrical. If anyone survived inside, the shockwave from the ceiling would rebound and finish the job. This theoretical calculation became reality with the explosions. The rocket trajectories were set to launch from the eastern part of Velika Pisarivka, where 3 village roads converge. This was the only corridor where the launch parameters allowed for a 90-degree turn angle due to the relatively dry clay soil of the Sumy region. The Ukrainians were also fortunate in terms of satellite visibility. Hourly orbital passes left a blind spot that allowed them to evade Russian GRU signal interference during those intervals. Russian intelligence, unable to see the launch, was left with only radio static and the data from a swarm of mosquitoes settling on the Soj River. As the attack minute approached, the HIMARS launcher fired each rocket with a 1.7-second interval, producing a boom sound. The first pair was designed to tear through the north-south axis like wallpaper, the second pair to penetrate the roof directly above the briefing table, and the final pair to dismantle the radio chassis positioned alongside the reinforced concrete generator building. The launch code was loaded. The weapons team split into 3 separate vehicles. The operation time was limited to 3 minutes. The retreat route was marked. A GPS jamming map was drawn up. The logistics team waited 30 kilometers behind.
The thermal curtain was tested with a drone.
The order was, fire when target confirmed. A final check was made, and the engines started. 7:14 a.m. The Russian Black Sea Fleet's newly promoted rising star, Rear Admiral Mikhail Gudkov, had completed his preparations at the briefing table in his temporary headquarters in the Koronevo settlement. At the same time, the orderly officer, who had switched his cell phone to hands-free mode, began to relay the ceremony's speech over the shortwave band. This live broadcast was a golden target for Ukraine's Strategic Communications Directorate, as it came in as radio static on the earpieces of 3 separate electronic listening teams north of the Sumy border. The Ukrainian listening team picked up the signal. The coordinates were transmitted to HIMARS. The driver stepped on the gas. The ramps rose to the top of the hill. The launch system was armed. Controlled breathing began. 4 vehicles took up their positions. 2 real ramps adjusted their height. 7:25 a.m. The fire code came. The missile capsules opened. The first rocket took off. Then 5 more.
The engine trails lit up the sky. Russian radar couldn't detect them.
The launcher shifted into reverse. Within 3 minutes, it entered another tent. The forest was silent.
The rockets were approaching their target.
The Russians were still focused on the ceremony. There was no alarm. The main computer received no signal. The counter was set to 0. The rockets entered the last 500 meters. The GPS made a correction. The laser altimeter was activated. The first rocket found the ceiling.
The first rocket scorched the right front curtain of the briefing tent like a heat brush, and particles that sounded like typewriter keys flew off the wall, tearing the canvas like strips of paper.
As the tent material bent backward against the tent's steel frame, the rank caps flew into the air like hand grenade pins. Gudkov likely didn't have time to stand up from his desk before the ceiling caved in. The rocket's impact shock distributed equal pressure in all directions. The rocket's body, striking the corridor's ceiling, created a delta-shaped hole, and the shock wave sucked the area under the table like a vacuum, igniting the stacks of paper. The second wave of rockets followed the same hole and lifted the rear section of the tent in an inverted mushroom shape, and the generator fuel that had accumulated in the substructure turned into a column of fire. The third rocket cut off the right-wing briefing. The fourth rocket blew up the generator. The power went out. The fifth rocket entered the radio room. The sixth rocket sealed the escape route. The tent collapsed from above. 7:28 a.m.
In less than 3 seconds, 6 rockets dumped a heat pressure mixture equivalent to 450 kilograms of TNT into the briefing area, exposing the 23 soldiers inside to a vacuum shock in a zero-entry scenario.
The pillar of flame rose 300 meters.
A black mushroom cloud rose into the sky.
The tent frame was blown into the air.
The surrounding huts burned.
Ammunition boxes exploded one after another. The sound of the fire roared like an engine. The shock wave shook windows 5 kilometers away. The Russian patrol surrendered, unable to approach. The first aid team could not enter.
The Ukrainian General Staff had been applying the single-round maximum effect principle to Western-supplied precision munitions since the end of 2024.
For General Gudkov, Western weapons came with a different tariff. The concept, which began with Magura Fi-5 swarms destroying naval ships in the Black Sea, had evolved into a ground campaign targeting generals with GMLRS rockets. Artillery units, entrusted with the chassis footprint of HIMARS launchers on field roads patrolled around the clock, converted the hot position received from live radio broadcasts into firing coordinates in a maximum of 6 minutes.
This was precisely what sealed Gudkov's fate. At 8:40 a.m.,
according to the first field report from global media, 6 guided GMLRS rockets penetrated the roof with chemical energy-driven armor-piercing warheads during the ceremony inside the corridor, leaving no chance of escape for the approximately 20 officers and non-commissioned officers inside. The fate of Nariman Shihaliev, the officer in charge of Gudkov's intelligence corridor, was the same. Over 20 high-ranking Russian commanders, a highly valuable asset for Ukraine that could be located using HIMARS. The information note shared by local media on the morning of the attack operation recorded both the attack and the Kremlin's confirmation within seconds. General Gudkov, his deputy Nariman Shihaliev, and over 20 Russian officers were taken down by 6 HIMARS rockets.
The target range was 150 kilometers. For HIMARS, which can reach a maximum range of 300 kilometers, it was not a difficult task.
The 126-second interval between the launch of the rockets and the explosion provided deviation data that will go down in the history books of Ukrainian artillery intelligence synchronization.
Ukraine's rocket fire pattern had abandoned the static battery model used in ground warfare since the end of 2023. In the Sumy Oblast, a sliding tent system was built on muddy mixed terrain for the M142 batteries, known as floating HIMARS. The ramps climbed hills to eye level with aerial drones and were rolled into another tent within 3 minutes after firing, using the no center point tactic. The salvo fired at Gudkov was the culmination of this mobile theater. The Russian Ministry of Defense confirmed the death of Deputy Commander of the Navy Mikhail Gudkov on Thursday, July 3. This was announced by Primorsky Krai Governor Oleg Kozhemyako. Primorsky Krai Governor Oleg Kozhemyako stated that the heroic commander was martyred at his post, along with his close comrade in arms Nariman Shihaliev and approximately 20 other officers who were eliminated in the same attack. Gudkov's funeral was held in secret. The news that emerged about the attack came as a surprise even to the sensitive munitions lobby in the West. This time, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense did not share any evidence of General Gudkov. The ministry confirmed Gudkov's death with only the line high-value target, confirmed. The message between the lines was clear. Interviews or photos are unnecessary. If they are pinpoint accurate and disrupt the strategic nervous system, a black screen is more effective than a funeral photo. Gudkov's story presented a rare configuration for war analysts, transforming a naval admiral into a land front coordinator. This appointment at the general admiral level signaled a personnel reshuffling crisis within the Russian military. Now, with the mastermind behind the Black Sea Fleet's offshore planning lost in the field, the Fleetland coordination line has been cut. The practical consequences on the Kursk front became apparent within the first 48 hours. The Oskol defense pocket east of Koronevo lost its artillery air coordination node immediately after the HIMARS salvos. When the local radar unit's Orlan 10 drone package collided with Kyiv's Widowmaker electronic jamming, 19 out of 27 drones lost their link. An artillery battery unable to read the video feed of rising deltas fired false echoes, blowing up an ammunition truck in its own barracks. This domino effect caused Gudkov's so-called frontline exercise to fail on the first day. The psychological vacuum was an added complication. Nationalist Russian war blogs like Rybar and Greylord criticized Gudkov's death, framing it as a frontline show for high-ranking officials. The term general tourism became a trend on Russian social media channels, and calls were made to reduce the frequency of so-called morale tours to the front line. This means prolonging the decision-making process. Battalions with experience in the field waiting for decisions to be signed will probably have to adapt to a video conference version of the chain of command. Operational impact. General Gudkov's dismissal has opened a new window of opportunity for Ukraine. We are talking about pressure on Kursk with longer-range HIMARS M57 rockets via the Sumy Oblast or curving north to the Bryansk axis, cross-border special forces raids, and even partial infiltration armored reconnaissance attempts. Since Nariman Shihaliev, the officer overseeing Gudkov's intelligence channels, was also killed in the same attack, Russian Federation logistics and supply data is currently unattended in storage. Ukrainian planners find this critical. This is because open sources have revealed that the amount of artillery ammunition pumped into the northern sector has been reduced from 330 tons per day to 220 tons. The Ukrainian army's likely strategy is a series of pressure waves resembling a three-prong bow. One prong will extend from the Velika-Pisarivka border crossing to the Oriol Highway via a HIMARS fire corridor. The second prong will deploy an unmanned tank drone unit from the Krastopilya forest line, and the third prong will infiltrate via the Novaya Sloboda farmland strip using air-mobile mixed tactics. These three teeth will simultaneously strain Kursk's technical logistics lifelines, fuel depot, air landing zone, and Highway P-200. Unless the void left by Gudkov's death is filled by a commander with sea-land hybrid experience like his predecessor, the Russian reflex will lean on the defensive line. Thus, the stage will remain set for Ukraine's hit-and-run, intelligence-driven rocket and shell cycle. An ironic shackle has also formed for the Black Sea Fleet. The assassination of the deputy Navy commander reinforces the claim that the same chain of command responsible for air defense in Crimea cannot prevent drone attacks outside the port. Among the documents still on Gudkov's desk are reportedly files on the amphibious re-equipment of the 155th Marine Infantry Brigade. Once a general with a land-based background or an inexperienced commander takes charge of these files, the planning cycle will enter a turbulent phase. The interpretation of military analysts in Odessa is clear. Managing a fleet with a land commander is like a tanker driver parking on a runway. As we have seen, Ukraine has done more than just take down a rear admiral with a HIMARS salvo. Kiev has opened a hole in the Kremlin's narrative that its deep rear is untouchable. According to Soviet-era disciplinary regulations, the death of a general is not considered a cause for panic. But in the modern age, images of fire broadcast on television and images of military ranks circulating on social media undermine morale on the front lines. When the Western media's initial reports screamed that a commander promoted by Putin 2 months ago had been killed, even Moscow's promotion compensation mechanism was shaken. For this reason, instead of experience and seniority, colonels from regions with the fewest losses began to be selected for emergency promotions, and the pores of experience have already opened. Gudkov's post-mortem sums up the situation in a single sentence. The waves of the Black Sea have reached the northern forests, and the shadow of missiles has buried the glitter of generals in the shadows of the leaves. New targets have been set for Ukraine. We are referring to the instant decision-making cells in Kursk, the caravan pressures in the electronic desert that will open via Sumy, and the Navy's off-port coordination files left unattended on the shelves. The single frame that appeared on the screens of European capitals, a destroyed briefing tent and a burned rank insignia, may seem like a damage of just a few square meters in Moscow's eyes, but on a geostrategic scale, it is as critical as a nerve lock, and the front is no longer just a red line. In this era of precision strikes, coordinates have turned into random networks extending to the corridors lined with portraits of Moscow's generals. As the blue sky echoes above the Kursk pines, Ukraine's list of high-value targets waits on standby. The moment the green LED lights up, silence will explode in another general's room. A command as short as an itch on the lips, 6 rockets, a ceremony, a tent. This is now the scale of modern warfare. Gudkov's medals may be dug up from the ground, but the Kremlin's untouchable rear front fairy tale will also turn to ashes and mud, and every rocket will continue to whisper that there are no untouchable coordinates in the northern forests, where yellow pine needles turn into nightmares. Don't miss the next adrenaline rush. Subscribe, give us strength, like, share, discuss. The War Chronicle is being written here. You watched, we told the story. Greetings from the front lines. See you in the next video. Stay well, stay resilient. Thank you for watching.